Ben Doughty, joined by your main man and co-host Andy Blade. We're also delighted to have an audience eventually with legendary Generation X guitarist Bob Derwood Andrews. Good to see you finally, sir.
Who is currently in the North Pole.
It looks that way. I thought you were in California, mate.
I am in California, but we're 3,500 feet above sea level, which is higher than anywhere in the UK. And it's, we get 4 seasons. 2. Fucking hot and fucking cold.
So, I believe that you're talking of your early days as a musician. I believe your first inspirations, or at least according to that thing called the internet, were Paul Kossoff and Rory Gallagher.
I mean, they were big influences. I really started my first music that I called my own, and I thought was made specifically for me, was rock and roll. And I don't mean Keith Richards rock and roll. I mean Gene Vincent, Bo Diddley.
Yeah.
That was the first, like, all-encompassing thing that I got into at the age of 10, 11.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking the other day, right? There was a rock and roll festival at Wembley Stadium in 1972. It was called Rock and Roll something, and it had Screaming Lord Sutch, Little Richard, Gary Glitter. Excuse me for mentioning that name.
Yeah.
And it was huge. There was a kind of rock and roll revival, and even the Sex Pistols shop was called Let It Rock, where I used to get my glitter socks. So I really immersed myself in rock and roll, and that was until Bowie came along, and then punk. That was music that I explored and loved, And
I believe you were playing in 1976 with a band called Paradox when you were talent scouted by a young Billy Idol. Can you pick up the story for me if that's true?
It is. There's a grain there, but really, we were just mates. And we're just pretending to play music and be in a band. In fact, we didn't have a bass player, and we wondered why we sounded so lightweight.
Yeah.
And then someone said, "Well, you need a bass player." And one of us decided that we should do a show. We used to rehearse in this church crypt in Fulham, and so we did the show, and like 200 punks turned up because it was the night after the Pistols were on the Bill Grundy show. So everyone was it must be a punk show. We had no songs and no idea what we were doing. We thought it'd just be a party for us. And they stormed the stage and smashed our shit up. And after all the bedlam and the dust was settling, along comes this blonde-haired punk who spoke very nicely and asked if great guitar, would you audition for my band tomorrow?
Yeah.
And honestly, I thought he was going to knock me out, but until I heard his voice, and I thought, oh no, he wouldn't do that. And so I went along and joined the trio, which was John Tow on drums, Tony James on bass, excuse me, and Billy on, he was on guitar, but he wanted to switch to vocals, and I joined that, and that was it.
Tony James seems to have been your best buddy in Generation X then.
Well, when we started out, it was a level playing field, and it's, my previous band was all mates, as I said. But this was different. It was professional. We were actually in a rehearsal room, and I think they had a manager and stuff like that.
So how long did it take for him to get on your tits?
Tony?
Yeah.
Oh, quite a while. Like I say, it was all level. But there's such a big age and cultural difference between me and Tony. He was 7 years older than me.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And at the age of 17, that might as well be an uncle.
Exactly. I mean, even people 2 years older than me, I thought
Yeah,
were well
we
old.
we had nothing in common apart from what we were doing rehearsing.
But was he encouraging and, welcoming?
He was great at the time, and we had a lot of fun, and he was usually the butt of the jokes. But eventually, once we became investable, and I mean like a record company signed us and suddenly we were their investment, everything changed, and the university education came to the fore, and the 7 years older, and I'm in charge, I'm the boss, I'm intelligent, I know what I'm doing. And the gap started to grow up until I left 3 years later, where it's like, I just don't like these people. They're not my people,
But it takes you a while, doesn't it, to especially at that age, to know what other people are about, where they're coming from.
Like I say, if I'd have grown up with them and we'd have hung out in the streets like our mates did, and but I didn't. I just stepped into a situation and nobody knew each other, and really they didn't take the time to get to know me at all.
What was your relationship like with Billy?
Pretty good, yeah. And until he got sucked into the
machine.
I need yes men around me, and I was anything but yes.
Yeah, I mean, he was always quite affable when we played that gig. Remember, at I think it was the first gig of Generation X at some place, Central Art School.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
and,
it was brilliant.
But I'd met him a couple of times before then, and he was always affable, but he didn't seem anything like the fucking twat he turns into. Something happened. I think cocaine maybe happened along the way.
I think he was dabbling in the drug life just before I left, and then afterwards, who knows, because I wasn't around. But I think he really hit it. And
I've seen some interviews. It's quite fun actually to watch interviews with Billy Idol when he's successful in the States. And he's out of his fucking tree every time, and he's very watchable. Very watchable.
Yeah.
In the same way.
Was that something you steer clear of, the drug scene then, Derwood?
Well, no, not really.
No,
it's very difficult, when someone brings out a baggie. It's like, oh yeah, I'll try that. No, but I dabbled in it since I was 15,
Yeah.
And luckily survived all that shit and came out the other end.
When you say you came out the other end, are you in recovery or you just grew out of it?
No, I gave up drinking 3.5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I figured out I don't think I was an alcoholic. I don't think I was a druggie. What it is, if you relate it to dogs, right? I was resource aggressive, which means if it's there, I'm going to fucking do it. I don't care if it's a plate of mashed potatoes or a pile of cocaine. Yeah. If it's there, I've got to finish it. And so that's where I was. And so therefore, it was quite easy to just knock it on the head,
Yeah. I mean, I know some people like that they don't identify as alcoholics or addicts, and I think they're probably not in some of these cases, but they simply wanted to see the world through new eyes and didn't want to poison themselves anymore, and they've found it's been beneficial and life-changing, but without it necessarily being that life-saving thing with a person who is an alcoholic.
I think once you've had enough of drinking and you manage to stay off for a little while, if it's at the right moment, you think, what the fuck,
I never meant
that again.
Yeah, I never meant to quit. I just had one dreadful night where my mind exploded around a friend's house, and the next day I was like, oh, really embarrassed, and drove home and said, oh, fuck that, I'm not drinking today. And that just lasted. I never thought, oh, I'll have a drink now, even through the pandemic. You know, it's like it was tempting, but yeah.
Yeah, but that, I mean, even that, it shows what drinking habitually does is becomes too much of your life, and it's something through a pandemic or anything about the fact that's green light.
Yeah.
So get the beers in for the next year.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it's like if you recognize, for me, if I recognize that habit to want to do that, to have the inclination to want to do that, I have to now think, why the fuck would I want to do that when I could be spending my time doing something music, a bit more creative? And if you find that that's better, then for me I think it's a no-brainer.
That probably is the great lie, isn't it? That you think that alcohol and drugs will facilitate your art and your music, and it'll make you be able to go to take it to new levels. When in actual fact, I think most career-long artists like yourselves would probably be of the opinion that your straight head is the supreme creative zone. In actual fact, do you think so, Derwood?
It really is a clear head, and I mean, I still say stupid things to the wrong people and burn bridges, but at least I can remember doing it, and I felt justified, you know. Whereas if you're drunk, it's like, you know, I've hung around with a lot of really bad drunks, and the one thing I noticed is if they can't remember doing something or saying something, then it doesn't exist in their mind. They didn't do it. And I remember dragging a friend into my guest house and showing him that he opened up bottles of beer on my new cabinetry, you know, and he was like, I don't remember doing that. It wasn't me. And it's like, well, who was it? You know, the beer fairy. Denial. It's all denial. And once you face it and go, look, it's a really bad look to be in your 60s and losing your fucking mind, you know.
I think it's a young person's game if you're going to go in for those kind of ribald excesses. But so dragging back to your youth, before we finish with that particular period, did you? I imagine, like a lot of the bands that came in that first kind of wave of punk vanguard, I imagine it was quite meteoric, and it felt like it was happening very fast, like Top of the Pops and a deal with Chrysalis and that kind of a bit of some kind of pop stardom. Did you feel it had happened very quite radically?
What I discovered is all of those things I didn't really require, I didn't like, I didn't want. I was going to
ask you, yeah.
And if you look at those Top of the Pops, I mean, I think we were on there about 6 or 7 times. If you look at them, you've never seen a more miserable guy. And I was only 18 or 19. And it was like, this isn't, you know, I used to look, when I was a kid, I'd lay in the bath and listen to the radio. And this one song stuck in my mind. And you can laugh, you know, it's kind of corny, but Guitar Man by Bread. I used to lay in the bath and listen to that, listen to the words. And I thought, I want to be a guitar man, you know? But it wasn't a plan. It just happened. And when all this, you know, like, I mean, bear in mind,
it's like it wasn't Psycho Killer that you really liked.
Yeah, really. Bear in mind, we had absolutely no money. We were all on the dole. Well, me and Mark were on the dole. Even though we were signed to Chrysalis, we'd go in there and steal a bunch of records, sell them down the road, you know, just surviving. So on one hand, you had this kind of pretending to be pop stars. On the other hand, you were getting on the bus to go and do the, you know.
Did you get ripped off commercially?
Yeah, I guess the manager made the most money because, you know, as soon as an advance came in, he'd take his cut, 20%.
Who was the manager again?
Stuart Joseph. And I'm still friends with him. It's weird. I'm friends with everyone who's kind of
Wrong
could
view
have
in some
been
way.
could have been much better at their job.
Yeah.
It's the same with me. There's a lot of people.
Yeah, but I
from
like
then.
it, you know. Liking someone
So
goes a
even
long way.
our boss of our record label, this guy called Caruso, he was a real spiv, and he ripped us off terribly. I mean, really, just completely ripped us off. But he's such a funny character that I've met him in later years, and it's very hard, you know, to really hate people that have got enough character about them. You can kind of understand where they're coming from, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, like I say, he took his legal 20% and he bought an Alfa Romero, whatever it was, and, you know, was lording it around. And like I say, we're signing on and getting to the gigs and the TV shows on public transport. And I mean, so it wasn't about wanting things and wanting to be a rock star. It was my main focus has always been just play the fucking guitar, man, and do something original with it.
Was it different with Westworld?
No, yes, it was, yeah, because I'd had 10 years of being in the business, so to speak, and was living in a fucking squat. And I was just so fucking fed up with it. I came up with the idea of Westworld and met the people, and we created our own buzz and our own thing. We made our own record, and it was a real mission to finally do something that came from me, you know, like songwriting, and to make some fucking money.
And did you enjoy that this time round then?
Yes.
That you didn't before?
Yes, it was the most fun. It was so great.
And you had a big commercial hit right away with Westworld.
Well, yeah, that was the problem, because we put out Sonic Boom Boy ourselves on a 12-inch and created this buzz in London. And of course, when we signed to RCA, the first thing they want to do is release a record that has a buzz already, which is fair enough. But it left us in a situation where we had to go promote that all over Europe and stuff, and found it very difficult to record the album, because once you have a hit, you have to knock out the album.
They were looking for you to replicate that, maybe the same vibe.
It was just a question of time, you know.
Yeah,
we didn't finish the album until we'd had 4 singles out.
Yeah,
and I remember seeing Westworld on the Tube. Remember the Tube program? And there were many of my peers, you know, who had gone on to do something else. And that's what I was trying to do at the time. And I was really, really fucking jealous. But then I hoped the song would be shit, you know. And it was really good. You know, I'd met you. The only time outside of Generation X I'd met you, you probably don't remember, but I was in a pub in Highgate and with Spiz, funnily enough, and you came in and you were looking for someone, and you saw me and you came over and said hello and said something about you were getting some band together or something like that. And then I didn't see you after that and forgot all about it. Then suddenly I see you on the Tube. And I thought, what a cunt.
Yeah. That's nice of you to say.
Well, what happened with the fun? You said you had fun with that. So what sort of fun were we talking about?
The whole band, or the whole concept, was to do fun rock and roll music with inane lyrics that meant absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And hopefully last for a year or two. And we fulfilled that dream, you know, and walked away with a bunch of money. So it was all good.
Yeah.
What was the importance of having inane lyrics that didn't mean anything? Was that why were you resolutely keen on that?
because
approach.
I loved Marc Bolan. I mean, people call him a poet, but
yeah,
it's kind of a name.
Some of his lyrics are
and Bowie.
really.
And Bowie, yeah. I don't know. It's strange. You can have great. I mean, Andy, you write great lyrics, and they're meaningful, but you do it in a way that I don't know. It makes me think. I don't know if it makes anyone else think. But coming up with a title like Banana Bamboo, I'm obviously not trying to change the world.
You're not trying to follow Bob Dylan's direction exactly with that.
Exactly. It's just going back to what I said at the beginning. Rock and roll. What's that, Little Richard? What Babaloo Bop?
Yeah.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah.
I remember John Lennon once saying, no group, be it the Beatles, Stones, Dylan, or anybody else, ever improved on Whole Lot of Shaking for my money. That's a John Lennon quote. So he obviously thought that format was the best in its simplicity, without people intellectualizing it more. Which obviously, but it's about being organic to yourself. And obviously, for Andy Blade, it makes sense for him to be poetic and vitriolic and cerebral. And you're saying you could admire that while not wishing to emulate that form at all.
Well, back then, I mean,
you can never write too literally. Anyone that writes too literally, it's always a crap song. Yeah. Even if you're trying to convey something, you've got to hide it.
Yeah. I mean, I must admit, what I've done since then, I would like to think is a bit more thoughtful.
Yes. Well, let's talk about that. From getting off the pop stuff.
Still on Westworld for a bit. So Liz Westwood was the singer, and then how did you meet her initially?
Well, it's not my finest moment, but I basically stole these people from my best friend, who actually saved my life when I was like 15. So I don't feel too good about that, but I did give him the opportunity to.
They were a band already formed.
They were a band starting off, and I swooped in there playing guitar, and there was a point he wanted to be the front man, right? And there was a point where I said to him, look, this is ridiculous. No record company is going to understand you being the front guy and Liz playing the tambourine and doing backing vocals, because she's a front person. And he said to me, he said to me, well, there's no way I'm going to be standing behind a woman. And I took that as a terrible thing to say. And so I stole the group. And he kind of sealed his own fate. But like I say, he pulled me out of the River Thames when I was 15. And I feel a great debt to him, because I've had an extra 55 years,
So you're willing to turn around him saving your life just because he said some, maybe an off-the-cuff remark that was derogatory towards women.
No, I didn't realise that it was.
I thought it was the future of the band. It wasn't just a remark.
No, I know.
Yeah.
It's interesting that he actually literally saved your life. I thought that might have been a metaphor for you being in some kind of big amount of trouble, but you actually mean he literally saved your life.
You probably prevented your mate who saved your life from being in the biggest band that they would be huge still now, filling arenas and.
Yeah, it's a burden, Yeah,
you have to carry that. So then, how long did it take between meeting Liz and starting the band to marrying Liz Westwood?
I didn't marry Liz.
Didn't you? Marry, be with partners. But I thought you were married actually.
No.
It says that online.
Well, it says a lot online, doesn't it? No.
So you weren't married?
No, we were boyfriend and girlfriend for 10 years.
Yeah.
And more importantly, we were working partners. And I thought she had a really, if you worked at it, she had a really interesting delivery and tone. And she was a star, Yeah,
she's great. She sang on my album.
Let's get a plug in.
That one.
What a
And,
great
No,
album.
she was at
yeah.
the gig. She was at the gig at the Union
and
back
we did that gig together. Yeah,
last year, I believe it was, and she did have that star quality. I wasn't overly familiar with her at the time, but she had that sense of sort of elevated star quality on a night, I think. So when did Westwood come to an end for you?
Well, it came to several ends. RCA dropped us and didn't release our second album, only in Australia and Europe, I believe. So they dropped us. Nick, the other guy in the band, soon as the record deal was over, he just walked out with all our money and all our equipment and just left. And it was like, oh. So it was just me and Liz in our little flat in Putney.
Yeah.
And one day in 1989, it was a dreadful year because, you know, once you sign a deal and all that, I said to my dad, I'm never going to have to sign on the dole again.
Yeah.
And then in 1989, I was signing on the dole again.
Yeah.
And it was really depressing. And then someone called up and said, have you got any new songs? Because we really like Westworld and we're a record company. And it turned out they were a record company with a shitload of money and no idea what to do with it. And eventually me and Liz recorded an album called Movers and Shakers, which was a bit more guitar rocky than Westworld.
Yep.
And it was only going to be released in the United States. So we said to the record company, well, we should go and live there if it's only going to be released there, you know. And so we moved to America and basically milked it for about 4 or 5 years.
And have you stayed in the States ever since?
No, we came back, and when that record company dropped us, we ran out of money. We came back. We did something called Moondog, which we kind of got into the jungle scene at the time, and I wanted to put slide guitar on jungle beats, and so we did that. We put out 3 or 4 albums, just low key, and then that came to an end, and me and Liz came to an end, and went on to something else. You know,
It's weird the way that we met, isn't it, on Instagram?
I tell you what, you know, I'm not a huge fan because I don't really know what I'm doing of social media and all that. But the amount of good things, if you take the opportunity, that come out of a random introduction is pretty damn good, you know?
Yeah.
Yourself included, yeah.
I mean, we'd met before, but not really any more than hello. And
yeah. I just, there's very few, particularly singers, front people, that I understand, and I understand you, and I get you, and I like you, you know, and I think you're really good.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've really enjoyed work. I don't normally, you know, it never works out when I work with other people, especially writing songs. I mean,
especially guitarists.
Yeah, right.
And so it's great to, you know, I think there's some of the best, definitely, I would say, the best songs that I've come up with, have been with you, included with you on that album, and You're Strange. I mean, one day that song will get its just dessert.
Yeah, exactly. The whole point to me, being a guitar man, and you got to finish what you started and make it available, make it exist, and then one day maybe someone will discover it. And
but it's,
you know, it happened over here. I had a band called Empire. When I left Generation X, I started a band called Empire.
Was that with Ian Woodcock, wasn't it?
He stepped in after we fired the original bass player. Yeah, just for a few gigs and recordings. But absolutely nothing happened with it. It was just dead in the water. And then somehow that record made it over to the States, and you can, you know, you might not believe me, but it started a whole fucking movement in Washington DC.
Really?
That bands took elements of what we did, turned it into emo, because that was like post-punk emotional music. And, you know, bands like you might not have heard of, and I didn't at the time, but Fugazi and Rites of Spring, and, you know, these really credible, great American bands that cite that album as a turning point.
I know Ian from Fugazi, and he mentioned Empire once to me.
Yeah, and it just shows you got to finish what you're doing. You got to make it exist, and then your job is done. And whatever happens to it is in the lap of the gods, you know. Yeah,
there aren't many of our peers doing much that's any interest at the moment. Have you found? Or hardly any doing anything other than just doing the old hits.
Yeah, it's
I would find that really, really constricting. I mean, I've got the luxury of having both things I can do, and it's great doing ETA, and it's great fun doing it
with a new band.
If I was just with a great band, but if it was just that I was doing, I'd be really fucking depressed. It's a case of
becoming what you hated.
Yeah. You know, I'm against the idea of reforming. I've always thought that even when I was, you know, a kid, I thought that's not the same thing anymore. But
it just means you run out of ideas, doesn't it?
Yeah, but if you're doing it for fun, and if the band is fucking great, as Trojan and the Teeth are, then it makes it worthwhile doing. And as I said, it's alongside my solo stuff, which is it's a great balance to have. But there aren't many others. Out of the punk rock people, who do you rate and who don't you rate?
I've always loved Johnny Rotten and Pill.
Yeah.
I just think he's a great
ambassador. Johnny Rotten. I don't know about Pill so much, but
I think he's a great ambassador for what we all started doing 50 years ago. I still think he is now.
Yeah. He's made that.
I think he's funny. I think Pill really musically put something out there that hadn't been put out there before.
Yeah, he gets a lot of bad press from people.
Well, I think he still drinks, doesn't he?
Yeah, but I mean, aside from that, he gets a lot of people seem to hate him now and think he's some right-wing Nazi. And
like the
Morrissey thing, you know, and just because of a couple of comments. And when you know someone and you know they're not a fucking Nazi, and when other people who don't know them at all start saying so and so's a Nazi, there's no meaning to the word anymore. And he's not, you know, he's funny and he gets up people's noses, and that's what he's always done. And if you didn't know that before, then why did you like the Sex Pistols?
Yeah.
Did you see the I think it was Disney Plus mini-series called Pistol?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
What did you make of it?
I don't know. It kind of left me cold. It was just like,
I couldn't even watch it.
You wouldn't watch it, would you, Andy?
I wouldn't.
You refused to watch it.
I watched Sid and Nancy, and that just pissed me off all the way through it.
Sid and Nancy, yeah. Well, yeah. What can you say about that?
So, out of bands like you, do you like bands like the UK Subs? Do you have you ever liked that sort of thing?
Not really. No. I think it's. See, I don't think it's very musical.
Sham 69.
I love Sham 69 because I love Jimmy Percy and Dave. But
Skids.
Skids were good. Yeah,
Skids were great. I met Richard Jobson the other day.
I know. I saw that. Yeah. No,
great band. Some great singles.
Yeah. Exactly.
Cockney Rejects are still doing the rounds today. Still touring.
I remember reading something about 5 years ago where they said this is our last gig. You know, so oh right, yeah.
Jeff Turner is a nice fella and he can box a bit. I've done a lot of training sessions with him a few years ago at the Peacock Gym, the old Peacock Gym. And Jeff knows his way. He knows his way around the ring, and he's a very affable fella. That's what.
Yeah, I know Michael Geggers more than any of those. Yeah.
Yeah, he was quite a good guitarist, really, wasn't
He's a very good guitarist. Yeah. We had, me and Mark suffered a bit doing the Jimmy Percy album, because they came down and stayed there, and kind of the wrath of Generation X, and apparently how poncy we were, and you know the press's impression of that band is ingrained in people's minds, that we were phony punks, we weren't real, manufactured, Billy's an arsehole, you know. That really it really followed us around for a long time.
When was the last time you met Billy Idol in person or spoke to him?
At least 30 years ago.
All right. And when that Generation Sex thing happened, when that thing with Paul Cook and Steve Jones, what was your view on that? Good, bad? I know the answer to this, really.
Good, bad, ugly, I guess.
Can you work out how much they got paid? What do you reckon?
No, I don't know.
I've been trying to work that out for a while. It seems difficult to get hold of that information.
Yeah. I thank God that Steve and Paul have moved on to something that is, well, A, they can play properly, and B, it is more exciting. Because,
have you seen any clips of Frank Carter with?
Yeah, I thought it's pretty good. And
bad,
it seems to me to be a question of why not. You know?
Yeah, but don't you think that's whatever rift there is between them and John? Don't you think that's made it kind of it can never be repaired now?
Probably not. No.
They went to court over the right to use the songs in the Pistol drama miniseries, didn't they? Obviously, Steve and Paul were down with it and on board with it, and John was bitterly opposed to it and tried to prevent them from using the songs.
I think he just feels pushed out of it. It's not so much that doesn't want to allow the songs. It's just that he feels as though that whole project, they kept it at arm's length and didn't tell him about it, and that caused a big problem, as it would any singer with a band, especially a singer like him that basically made the face of the band and made the band what it is. Because let's face it, without him as the singer, we wouldn't know him. It's a bit annoying. I can see it as being a bit fucking annoying.
I remember him appearing on breakfast television when before it came out. They showed a clip of it, and they said, "Are you going to watch it, Johnny?" And he said, "Well, I have to, because it's about me." So he felt, regardless of, I mean, you say you didn't watch it on principle, Andy, whereas obviously John Lydon felt as if he had to watch it just to see
but what you
how
said,
they'd mangled his legacy, you know.
What you said, Derwood, is, but the betrayal of it, I think, is, you know, with that, can you understand that that would knock you quite a lot if you were involved, especially with the songwriting as well, and you were the main figure.
Main creative force.
Can drive you mad, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would, but I actually think that it all worked out for the best. You know, they're touring as the Sex Pistols, and it looks like a lot of fun. And he's touring with Phil.
Yeah, with Phil.
And you know,
I've got to admit, he has become a bit more of a uncool, let's say, since the sharp, witty 21-year-old to overweight. Sometimes spot on being funny, other times he seems to laugh at his own fucking jokes that aren't even funny during interviews. If you ever watch him, he'll say something and start laughing quite a lot, and it's not funny, and which means I think there's a lot of his ego's got a little bit kind of.
Well, don't forget he lost his wife
cancerous
as well. I mean that's got to really put a dent in your life, you know.
And that as well, and both John Rambo and Nora in quite close succession. They were both very, very close. His act wasn't like an act, really. He's like that, isn't he? And
I remember going to the Music Machine, was it? We always used to go there, and he'd be standing there in his Teddy Boy shit, you know, which obviously I was like, oh yeah, cool. And he just looked like our Elvis. you know, people say Billy's our Elvis.
If he died in his 20s, he would be, you know,
iconic.
Well, he is iconic, but I mean, he would be beyond legend by this point. But sometimes it doesn't work out to stay alive past your sell-by date, because you can tarnish.
I don't suppose Jim Morrison would be as iconic as he is if he was still alive.
No, he's either going to be painted in one political corner or another political corner, and he's said the wrong thing, and probably loads of Me Too things coming his way as well.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Well, the people that I wish were still alive would be Jimi Hendrix, Paul Kossoff. God, I mean, quite a few, mostly guitarists. But I would love to see and hear what these people were doing in their 70s and 80s. And I got an idea that it would be going back to where music started, really. The blues and fucking bebop and jazz. And
I often wonder what Marc Bolan would be doing now if he was still alive, because I kind of like the idea that he didn't, because his last couple of albums weren't the greatest. So there's something about him dying then but I've softened on that a bit, and I wonder if he might have been doing some great stuff.
Do you know? Have you ever been to the shrine that there is by the tree that he had the fatal car crash into?
That.
It's still really well maintained, you know. It's still it's very ornate, and there's lots of tributes there. And it looks like there's an ever present vanguard of younger Bolan fans, presumably, who keep this thing the shrine that it is. You know,
that's what would have happened with Johnny Rotten.
Yeah,
I've got a shrine story because we literally lived about 200 yards from it. Me and Liz in Putney. Well, it was Barnes, you know.
Yeah.
And we used to go, or I used to go every year back in the 80s, and there'd be about, I don't know, 10 people show up, and, you know, with guitars, and it was very low key. And there was one time, I think I would say it was the last time I took acid, but it probably wasn't. We were all going fucking potty, and we went to the tree, and I decided to climb it. And it wasn't actually the tree, because the tree that he crashed into was chopped down. You know, it was a tree next to it.
Yeah.
And I climbed that tree and just felt the need to jump out of it, shouting rock and roll. And so I did that and landed in a muddy pile of, you know, common mud, and broke 3 ribs, and then almost got arrested, because we then went and laid on people's cars, and it was just, it was nuts.
Quite a tribute.
It was. I do think it was a tribute. As I was laying in hospital the next day, still covered in mud, I felt that I'd done something positive. You know?
Yeah, I admire that. When I decide that it's the right time to go, I think I'm going to drive a Mini into it. That's my tribute.
Oh yeah.
One thing I didn't realise until one thing I didn't realise until quite a lot later on was it was Gloria Jones who was driving the car.
Yeah. He couldn't
I didn't
drive.
get that first. Yeah, so it was.
Yeah.
That was quite.
If you see the road, it's called Queen's Ride. It goes over a humpback bridge, and it's quite easily get the wheels off a car if you're going like 60 miles an hour.
And also the number plate was Fox.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
And then because it was wrapped around a tree, and he's in one of his lyrics, he's got a line.
Easy as picking foxes off a tree.
Picking foxes off a tree, yes.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, man.
Is that a good denouement? As we're closing in on an hour. I think it's been a great show. I've really enjoyed this one, because to be honest, knew nothing about Derwood like 55 minutes ago. I knew nothing about him except what I knew in terms of, you know, Generation X guitarist. You told me to do a little bit of research before we had this audience.
Well, you knew he was working with me.
Well, of course I knew that too, yeah. But I didn't. I had no concept of what he would look like or
I'm
sound
with
like
you.
or anything else. And I think it's been a
He's
great
all
show
right, isn't he? He's
and
all right.
it's been an absolute pleasure. So
Yeah, thank you,
thank you
Ben.
from me. I know you didn't expect me to be here even, but it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, nice. I'm glad I managed to get on eventually.
Yeah,
Fantastic, yeah.
Thanks for that.
So,
It's always
right.
we've only met like over a phone and a desk laptop, and since way back then. And so it'd be great one day. It'd be great to meet up in person. I don't know when that will happen, but
what I like about our relationship is even though it's just over the wires, we still manage to get really angsty at each other and sort it out, you know.
Yeah, we've been through quite a bit in the year and a half I've been.
I remember you saying, do you want me to get on a plane and get to LA and we'll have a fight? And I was like, well, I don't know. No, I don't think so. But I love all that stuff, man, you know.
So Blaze,
it's passionate.
Blaze, this will be good practice for you. Close your own podcast. Just tell people thanks for listening. Tell them to press the like and subscribe. Do all of that stuff. Or did I just do it?
I think you just did it.
Cheers, guys. I better shoot. I've got to get to a gym.
All right, cheers, Ben. Cheers, Derwood. I'll speak to you soon.
See ya.
Thanks, guys. That was a brilliant show. Well done.